Excellent. Well, welcome to all of those who were able to join us tonight for another episode of another Facebook Live with Doctors in Politics with some of our elected officials, our physicians who have decided that it is important for physicians to serve in public office. Today we have a couple of physician electeds in two very different parts of the country, in Iowa and in New York, who both serve on their local school boards. And so I wanted to allow them to introduce themselves, and then we have some questions that we'd like to ask them about their decision to run and how things have been serving. So maybe LoriAnne, would you like to go first?
Sure, I'd be happy to. LoriAnne Anderson. I am a family medicine physician. I'm in my 13th year practicing in Iowa. I do full spectrum family medicine, and now just starting my fourth year on our local school board. So we are a town. I live in a community of about 7,800 people. So we have a public school, about 100 to 110 per class, and then we also have a Christian school in our town. So unique dynamics in a small town with two different schools, a public and a private. So yeah, I can talk more, or we'll go over with questions too. So.
Yeah, sure. So Sara, why don't you introduce yourself, and then I can ask you guys some questions.
Sure. Hi, I'm Sara Siddiqui. I'm in New York, and I've been a pediatrician in Long Island for the past 20 years. I have 4 children, and I'm also a recently elected school board member. This past year, actually, I was elected in May. And we have also a smaller kind of school district. We have about 2,000 children total. It's a K through 12, and it's an amazing community. And I wanted to step up and help out and give my 2 cents for at the Board of Education level.
Excellent. That's awesome. How long have each of you been serving again?
I'm just starting my 4th year of serving, so I'll be up for re-election this coming fall.
This fall, you said?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and do they do your school board elections with the like the federal elections in the fall, the same day, or do they do it on a different day?
They do it on the same day as any, but it's not with federal elections. It's just with any kind of local bonds, bills, things like that need to be passed.
Okay, so. Got it. And Sara, how long have you been serving?
So I just got elected this past May,
okay.
May of 2020, a couple months after the pandemic started. That was a very interesting run, because you have to. It's a campaign. You have to run, and I was I ran against the incumbent, and it was quite a process. So it's very interesting, so to speak. And I really would encourage any of the doctors watching, anybody watching, to really start kind of getting involved. That's as local as you can get, and your school board does make a lot of decisions that impact you directly. So it is a really important thing to find out more about.
Is this something that either of you, or both of you, or neither of you were thinking to do like years ago, or is this something that became interesting to you more recently?
Yes. I mean, as a pediatrician, you're kind of always involved in the school in some way, shape or form. But honestly, I never really went into medicine saying I'm going to go into the school board. It kind of evolved as you kind of get more involved in what your children are doing and what other children are doing. And you just get more involved in things like PTA and the schools, and just kind of being involved in the community. It also was very helpful for me to be working in the same community where I live. And so you just kind of get involved in everything that's going on. And no, it wasn't something that I thought about before, but it definitely became something that I started thinking about as time went on.
Mm-hmm. I too did not have any thoughts of doing that. My husband and I joke that I'm really not a political person at all with you. And one of my patients actually medicine. So the secretary, I was doing her physical one. She said, "Hey, there's an opening coming up on the school board. The female, we're at a 5, and it was female and 4 males. And she said, you need a mom on that school board, and it would be great to have a physician. What do you think about running? And I came home and told my husband, and he kind of laughed and said, I think you should, but what's the deal? Because not really been political in the past. Yeah, 4 years ago, we weren't dealing with anything that we're doing now. So our community has just a hospital, and so I'm fairly well known in most of my towns since we're very small and take care of people. I had 2 middle school, I freshmen in high school and a 7th grader now, so they were in elementary school and middle school, and we were involved in athletic boosters and all of that kind of stuff, and so kind of took it as an opportunity, more of positions like, but we needed a mom on the school board, and I can't tell you how many times it's been more of I'm glad I'm a mom on the board as opposed to a physician. This year obviously has been different, but yeah, mine that said you need to go run. So I did not have a competitive run. I ran 2 spots open and there were 3. Really not super aggressive as far as needing to campaign. So that was kind of a little bit more of a relaxed atmosphere. Otherwise, I would have done it, to be honest. But yeah, it came out well.
A little bit of civics for our audience here. Are your board positions, are they at-large positions? In other words, do they draw from the entire school district? Or are they geographically districted positions where they have a representative from different areas?
We're at large.
All of them, all of the positions are at large?
Yes, same with us. Each school district has their own school board, and we do have in Long Island especially, our our towns, like we ourselves border 4 other school districts that are really close together. But each school district has their own board of education that's elected by the whole, everybody in that community.
Got it. Yeah. So again, for our audience, you can have either of these kinds of positions, at-large positions or geographically districted positions. If you're in a large urban area, it actually is more representative of the population when you have at least some of the seats geographically districted, because that's how we tend to move into areas is in a geographically restricted way. And so in order to get the most representation, the most diverse representation on a score, we typically want the geographically districted positions, particularly in large areas. It doesn't make as much of a difference, I think, when it's a smaller community, and that is also not as diverse, right? So one of the questions that I had for you guys is, outside of and even within the pandemic, has it been useful to you? Has it been a liability to you that you are a physician? Like, just if you have any specific examples of things that that have come up on the school board where it's been useful or maybe a liability.
I come from a very conservative, we are probably the reddest part of the state, maybe even the nation here. So we dealt with a lot of issues once coronavirus became politicized and masks became politicized. We did a lot of that. I was this of pushing for a mask mandate at our school, which I actually had a huge pushback from people basically saying that I needed to be thrown off the school board for wanting to protect our teachers and kids. We've been faced the entire year. We passed, our school board passed a mandate unanimously, but only because ton of work that I did to really educate my school board partners, the other members, because they're non-medical. That was helpful to me. However, I lost a fair number of patients that have switched from no longer private or for primary care, delivered their babies. They no longer come to me. So that was unfortunate. And so it didn't stop me where I was at. So we had a very tense school board meeting that was not fun at all, with people there without masks on, even though it was mandated in our school at that time once it started, and claiming that they were going to bring civil rights lawyers because this was civil rights. And so lots of difficult times from that standpoint. So it's been helpful. Obviously, I had a lot of support, letters to the editor, written papers, or letters directly to me saying, letters directly to the school board saying, you have a gem on your school board. No other school boards around in our county have a physician sitting on their school board. So listen to her, and she understands the science and is teaching science and stop talking politics. But politics in my area are very, very, very strong and very, very, very Republican. And that's it's got its good things and its bad things about it. My husband is the Sioux County Democrat leader, so that was a challenge from our standpoint as well. Mm-hmm. That automatically had me on a rung in a lot of areas around here. But I've had good things and bad things, particularly with the mic.
Wow, that's an amazing story. I mean, for myself, luckily, even though the area around us is very red, we're in Long Island, my own school district and even the surrounding school districts, the superintendents association is very strong. And my superintendent was very happy to have me on the board, but the rest of the board was also very cooperative, and we were able to, through really a lot of meetings and task forces, and just really having representation from teachers, community members, parents, and we were able to get the mask mandate going, because even in New York State, they made it kind of up to the school districts whether to do masking or not over the summer. And thankfully, my involvement, and also through the American Academy of Pediatrics, which I'm also involved in the New York State chapter, we were able to come up with similar kind of messaging to encourage not only our district, but the districts around us to enforce the mask mandate. But I think that in our area, it wasn't I think most people were okay with that. And once once community members and everything were also involved, it all kind of came to fruition nicely. It sometimes is challenging, because you kind of have to walk a fine line, especially as you were saying, LoriAnne, about your patients. It's very difficult. Sometimes you see people that are in your district, that are in your community, in your office, and you kind of have to wear your different hats all the time. So I have my pediatrician hat, I'm seeing my patients, I stick to that. And then when I'm at the board meetings, you kind of have to, we stick to that. So it sometimes is a little bit difficult, but for the most part, it's been a really great experience.
Wow, that's great. That it's brave that you decided to run in the pandemic. It's so great, hearing the various perspectives. I think one thing that Doctors in Politics really strives to do is to bring people together who are physicians, who have an interest in serving in elected office, because we don't have a community really of people who have done it or who are doing it. I think, some of the challenges that you guys, I'm sure, faced as you ran, I mean, maybe LoriAnne, this is maybe a little bit less true for you if you weren't running in a competitive race. It may be more true for you, Sara. It's that, I don't think, being a candidate is isolating anyway, regardless of, what your professional background is. But I think we don't have a tradition in our community, of our professional community, of even being politically engaged, right? Let alone running for office. And I think that the people who kind of share our perspective on, at the school board level, I think that you guys would probably be on the same page about whole child health, right? That development is not just about cognitive growth, but it's also about social and emotional learning, things like that, right? These are positions, unfortunately, I think that have become, at least in my community, it's very politicized. They're that's weird. We don't, that's not traditional. And we focus on academics here. I ran for school board in my community, which is a suburban community outside of Houston, in the greater Houston area. And it was very difficult. And there was really nobody in terms of physician colleagues that I could turn to have a conversation about how to navigate it, right? Like I said, I didn't realize that being a physician could ever be a liability. I never thought it could ever be a liability. I thought it was really going to work in my favor, that people would see that I'm coming at this with a scientific lens, but also through a lens of compassion, both. And nope. Insane.
Well, yeah, actually, I ran the year before and I lost. And so I want to tell you that even if you ran and lost, you may want to think again because your name is now out there. And sometimes, I also the previous year I ran, there was only one spot open versus 2 spots open this year. So there was only 1 spot open, and I ran against the incumbent person, which is always difficult. Who really had huge ties to the community. She was, born and raised here. Her parents were here, and so it was a difficult run. But it really taught me about the campaigning part of it and how, yes, you can't just come at it as I'm a doctor, I want to run, and you should pick me. You have to really put yourself out there. You have to be willing. I mean, I think I'm all for encouraging people to run. I think it's great. And I think the hard part of it as a physician is losing. But I think if you kind of learn from that experience and then really think about whether you still want to do it and then you do it. And, I think part of the reason why I made it the second time was because people were like, oh my gosh, she's never going to go away. Like, we better just get her on. We have no choice. So, but I mean, it's a good experience either way.
Did you guys think about running for school board? I mean, LoriAnne, this might not apply to you as much, or maybe it does after you were asked to run for school board versus other levels of government, right? So like versus city council or versus your county leadership or, higher than that. Like, was that ever on your mind? Is that something that is, potentially on the horizon, something you'd consider at this point, having served at the level of government where you are now?
City council is definitely something we've talked about it as a family between my husband and I, because again, I mean, we're in a very rural, very traditional community, and I'm trying to break barriers more from a female standpoint than anything, because I was the first full-time female physician in my practice. The other female practicing at that time when I joined was part-time. She homeschooled kids. So me coming in like, nope, my kids are going to daycare. I'm here. I'm in it full-time, and I'm ready to go, was a little bit of a change. I'm not from this community, originally from South Dakota. So in to hear from that, this is a very close-knit Dutch community. I fit in because I have blonde hair, but I'm short, tall like the other Dutch people. And I have a Danish last name. So everybody knew I didn't have a van in front of my name or a small end of it. And so I wasn't from here. But so city council needs a little bit of a shakeup. And so that's definitely on our radar, whether that be me. I've said we just had negotiations for our teacher salaries last night. And so in talking about that, we do an interest-based bargaining, which is a little bit unusual for school boards. A lot of them do not do that any longer. So we meet with our education group and negotiate contracts and benefits and barriers. And I said, I might not get elected again if I run, and because I'm for election, and I made the kids wear masks, and so I might not get elected. And so if I do plan to run again, but if I don't win, I would consider running for city council, because our city is very progressive. This is a very unique community. A lot of money, farming, ag, all of that kind of stuff. And our city does some pretty big things. And I think having some female influence on that, whether it be through medicine or not, our hospital is thriving. We just built a new hospital 6 years ago, a beautiful state-of-the-art facility. So we just have a lot of community support from that standpoint. So I'd like to tie into that if possible. So previously, I didn't really think about it. Since all of this has come up and I've seen what women do on a board and get things done, that kind of has pushed me a little bit of what can we do in this town to make it a little bit different? But
that's fantastic. Yeah. Sara, how about you?
I mean, honestly, school board was really what I wanted. I wanted to kind of integrate, my knowledge at work and kind of bring it into the school system. So I don't think I'm looking past that right now. I'm still learning so much. So just, having a physician background, I think it makes you you always want to learn. And I think that's really important because it is a big learning curve. I'm sure, LoriAnne, but I'm learning a lot about finance and, negotiating budgeting and, a lot of those ins and outs of the school board, even like policy and governance and all these things that you really don't learn through medicine or even, in your day-to-day practice. But it's been a really great learning experience. It really gives you a really good overall picture of what's going on in your school and in your community, and what things matter and what things matter to the community, and also just in terms of learning what each individual what they want. There's so many more people that kind of have your ear now, right? You're already, as a physician in a community, you already are there for people, but then everybody has just much more access to you. So those parties that you go to, and I mean, not now, but before, if someone would kind of pull your ear and be like, what do you think of this rash? Now you kind of, you're in it, you're there. You really are offering yourself up for all those things, which is great if you kind of have that, you want to be able to learn from everybody. So, but no, I'm not there yet. I want to first learn everything there is to learn about school board, and then, we'll see. I don't know.
Yeah. It's so interesting. I mean, this is a conversation that we are continually revisiting, I think, in Doctors in Politics. We originally set out to fundraise enough money to support 50 doctors to run for Congress. And then we had conversations about how a lot of women and also people of color, they don't often start there. If they have interest in running for public office, it's often that they want to run at a more local level, and that it's important to actually invest in those people because ultimately they can do a really great job serving in higher levels of office, and there are a lot of, I think, existing vehicles for supporting people in general who run as candidates through that, process of stepping up that ladder. And yeah, we figured that in Doctors in Politics, we probably should be supporting physicians at every level of government just because, the person running looks different for Congress sometimes, or maybe often, than the people who are electing to run at lower levels. And we want to be able to support everybody, the full diversity of our colleagues who choose to do this. One thing I wanted to ask you guys, I don't know if we have any questions from the audience. I don't think so, not yet. So I'll ask another question, and that is, do you find yourselves in the role of science communicator or teaching scientific literacy, either among your colleagues or in your community?
You can go ahead, Sarah.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, I think as what LoriAnne was saying, that there's not a lot of physicians in the area that are on the school board right now. And so especially during the pandemic, where my superintendent and even all the other superintendents had to literally learn about, viral illness and respiratory illness and transmission and viral load and PCR and rapid testing, all those things, so they really learned a lot, but I think they did look to us to give them the proper articles, or I would try to, give them vetted information and say, okay, this is good information that you may want to dispel or kind of put onto the website and things like that. So it was, yes, I mean, I think you do use right now, especially with the pandemic, you do use a lot of your professional and medical knowledge to kind of help communicate and help to dispense proper information, and then some of the improper information that sometimes was going on. So it was helpful, definitely.
Yeah, I had people from the teachers specifically reached out to me a ton. Can we choir? How can we do choir? Do we need bell covers on our band instruments? And how are we going to do this? Because, in Iowa, we have a limited time. You can be outside until November. That's even pushing it a lot of times. How do you do that as community? And so a lot of that came from all different aspects, not just my superintendent. But yeah, we just did a weekly rundown. This is the new, here's a more mask articles as to why we're doing if you need this. And a lot of my fellow school board members would message me saying, hey, I read this, think about this article, and is this true? And what is ivermectin? And all these different kind of things that are trying to get people to figure out what you're reading and why it's good and it's not. So I even feel like we've had the opportunity to get them in a direction of what makes a good source. Why is it a good source? So maybe not even in regards to just viral illnesses, but as far as what are you looking at for other methods of evidence for what you're standing behind and what you're supporting. And so that's been, I think, really helpful. It came from all different areas in the school, and that was very cool. So I think a lot of people, and the science teacher actually, our high school science teacher spoke at the very tense school board meeting that we had in favor of masks and why. And so she did a mini scientific rundown about this, and so that was helpful as well. So.
Wow. Yeah, that's really powerful that, people came together in your community to support that message. There was another question that I wanted to ask you guys now. It's eluding me. Yeah, I don't know. Is there anything else that you want to share with people who are considering, a run for school board? Something that you didn't know maybe going into it that you wish you had known?
I think one of the things that I learned, I would encourage everyone that's listening, or if you're in medicine, to think about, running for school board or some type of local position, or get involved in your community, in your local town government. Really get involved, because they're looking for people like you to help kind of deliver messaging. And I think as physicians, we kind of do have a little bit of an obligation to get involved in our community. So first I would say to to really, if you're thinking about it, do it, because you'll never know if you're going to succeed unless you try. And then you do get help. I mean, there are people that will support you from all different areas. So, my background is Indian Pakistani. So people came, I met so many different, so many people that I didn't even realize lived in my own community, who came out and saw that I was running and said, oh, we're going to help you. We're going to help you. And it's an amazing feeling that people that you may not have known before just kind of, meet you for the first time and say, oh, we want to support you. We want to help you. So all that kind of coming together is really a powerful thing. And I think more people should, step up and run.
I definitely agree. And I think just the knowledge of the impact that you can have in your community, whether you're in a big urban area, rural area, it impacts people every day. That's why we went to medical school. That's why we do what we do. We help change lives and make them better. But this is just a completely different able to do that. I had people say, why are you doing this? I mean, I'm family medicine OB, so I deliver all my own babies. The phone rang right now. Wow. I have to go. So I'm on call 24/7 if I'm in this town. And so there were a lot of people that said, well, why are you doing this have a family and you're doing all this stuff? Because I want to be able to make an impact in a different way. I make an impact every day that I go, and I have an amazing practice. I'm so blessed to have what I have. But this is a totally different way that I can impact how my kids are being educated, how they're being treated in schools, how are they being prepared for the future of this world differently than what I was prepared for in a small rural school. So being able to have that impact, talking about diversity, this is a very diverse area, but we have a large Hispanic population coming in. And so I see them all the time, but yet my other board members don't. So how can I be a voice and an advocate for them? And so I think that impact, it was one of the things that made me to do it, but it's been so much more than what I thought it would be. And so being able to have voice in a different way and use my brain in a different way than what I do every day otherwise. So finance, my wing, to me, I'd much rather learn Krebs cycle than the
That's
school
true.
cycle.
Yes.
Because they're both mind-blowing.
Yes.
So it's a different way you can touch people's lives. And I don't think any of us that went into medical school didn't want to touch lives in some way. So this, if it's even a thought, I completely agree. Go for it and run, because the impact that you can have is just beautiful.
Yeah, and our goal in Doctors in Politics, I'll close with this, is really to be able to support people to run so that they actually really do know more of what they're getting into, and they have the people in place to give them advice on things like, how do you fund a campaign, right? Like, how do you make sure that you're following the rules? How do you build a volunteer force? Like all of these things, right? Like what phone banking like app or like service should you use? Things like this. So it's not so daunting because we're hopefully building this architecture or infrastructure to support more physicians to run. You guys are just amazing to me and super inspiring, because you've done it at a time where I feel like you didn't have that support, right? And you just had to kind of invent it from thin air, like for physicians running for office. But yeah, thank you so much for joining us tonight. Like I loved listening to your reasons for running and like what you kind of discovered that you didn't realize would be it's so impactful about the work that you do as a physician on school boards. So thank you again. And we hope to definitely stay in touch with you. You are now both part of our community of electeds on Facebook.
Thank you. Thank you so much for reaching out. This was wonderful.
Yeah,
of course.
Thank you guys. Bye-bye.
All right. Bye.
Bye. Nice to meet you guys.
Nice.